The Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Decennial Committee on Local Government Efficiency meeting. This is Wednesday, March 27th, 3 p.m. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Delgado.
Here.
Fasella.
Present.
Friedman.
Here.
Gannett.
Here.
Nudo.
Here.
Tanner Harold. Ula.
Here.
And Barnes.
Here.
Okay. Quorum is present.
Thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as distributed. So moved. Seconded, George. Second by Phil. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak to the board?
Back.
Seeing none, we'll move on to the next agenda item, the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Decennial Committee meeting minutes from January 31st, 2024?
So moved.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll have a midpoint presentation by the Illinois Business Consulting Group.
So they're not here yet.
Okay.
We anticipated that they would be. I would suggest that perhaps we suspend the committee meeting and move on to the regular meeting, and then when and or if they show up, we could suspend the regular meeting and go back to the committee meeting. George, you're kind of our parliamentarian. Is that something that we could do?
Sounds plausible to me.
Okay.
So moved.
Yeah, so I guess as a committee member, I would make a motion to put the committee meeting in suspension.
And do we have a second on that? Second. All those in favor of pausing the decennial meeting?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so we will shift gears into the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board meeting, again, March 27th. It's been seconded. All in favor of approving the agenda? In favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Is there anyone who would like to speak from the to the board from the public? Hearing none, then we're going to move on to the next agenda item, and those are the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the Champaign-Urbana Mass Transit District Board meeting minutes from February 28th, 2024, open session?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next, we'll move on to communications. Are there any communications from the board? Anything from you, Carl? Okay. Next, we will have a presentation on the Willard Airport Minimum Revenue Guarantee Request by Carly McCrory, Executive Director of the Economic Development Corporation and Chair of the Airport Advisory Board. With Carly is Tim Bannon, Executive Director of the Willard Airport, and Jack Penning, Managing Partner of Volaire Aviation. Ladies and gentlemen.
I have the slides coming.
They'll bring him.
Okay.
All right, well, thank you everybody for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. As per the introductions, I'm Carly McCrory McKay. I lead the Economic Development Corporation, and I'm here with my other hat on as chair of the Airport Advisory Board. And I'll also just point out, we also have Jean DeLuce with us, who is CEO of Experience Champaign-Urbana and the vice chair of the Airport Advisory Board. So we are excited to be here today to talk about an effort that we have been working on to attract additional service out at Willard Airport, particularly leisure air service. So we'll go through these slides here, talk a little bit about what's going on, and then talk about the effort that we're working on right now.
Dances.
Okay, so air service development has certainly been a top priority for us in the community for a long time, something that we're always working on. But due to a variety of factors, we really feel like we are well positioned right now to be able to take advantage of some leisure air service opportunities, to be able to add additional service in our market for a variety of reasons. This is really important for a lot of reasons, but in particular, we feel like this is an opportunity to be able to help attract and retain existing businesses. This is something that comes up all of the time when we're having conversations with businesses about expansion opportunities and companies that are seeking out our community. From a tourism perspective, with Jane's hat on, it's certainly an opportunity to bring in additional tourists to our community and for experienced Champaign-Urbana to be able to bid on conferences that aren't even an opportunity right now due to the air service that we have. And then, of course, from a talent attraction perspective, it's really important from the quality of life aspect. So to be able to provide these services for the residents that we have living here in our community, and also be attractive to remote workers, which is a really important aspect of our local employment sector. So our ask is that we are going out into the community to ask for support to match the university's commitment of $500,000 towards a specific effort for leisure air service targeting Florida, Las Vegas, or Phoenix. We are out giving community presentations, talking to companies in the community to be able to garner this support, hoping to finalize it in the next month for some important conversations that we're going to have coming up in May, where we go out to DC for an air service development conference and meet one-on-one with the airlines and put our best foot forward and talk about what we've packaged together and try to recruit them here to our community. So that's sort of the 10,000 foot level of what we're doing. I'm going to hand it over to Tim Bannon, the executive director of Willard Airport, who's going to talk a little bit about what's going on there, and then we'll have Jack talk about the details of our effort.
Thank you, Carly, and thanks for having us. Again, Tim Bannon, Executive Director, Willard Airport, been in the community for about 6 years, so thanks for having us today. The air service across the country has never been more competitive today. You see a lot of communities putting up healthy incentive packages, which includes minimum revenue guarantees to attract carriers to serve markets, and that's especially relevant in the smaller regional markets such as ours. The good news, we just completed a master plan in 2022 at Willard Airport. What we found in that master plan is our facilities, our infrastructure, our runways, our taxiways, our terminal are all adequately sized, not only for today, but for the future, which includes the expansion into larger aircraft with leisure service. So that's really good. As a result, we also pursued money with the federal government to build out our TSA checkpoint, relocated to a different part of our terminal, the old cafe, for anybody who remembers where that was. And we'll expand from 1 lane to 2 lanes to accommodate a larger passenger queue and have dedicated pre-check. That project should be done in 2026. That's a really big thing for our community. Our rates and charges have been looked at the airport. We've restructured to be able to accommodate leisure service, going to a per turn fee structure for new entrants to our market instead of going to a traditional terminal rent environment like we do today with American Airlines. So we have 2 different rates and charges structures to accommodate new service in our market. That's the first time it's ever been done in our history at the airport. We also have a healthy incentive package that's been approved by our Airport Advisory Board, which includes up to $350,000 of marketing funds provided by the airport. Carly already mentioned $500,000 put up by the university. In the term of revenue guarantee, we also have fee waivers and startup cost initiatives offered to the airlines. Finally, we have concessions coming to the terminal. Many of you saw that Einstein left us last year. We have added or signed a new agreement with Ion Grove Cafe, which will offer a lot of local flavors and coffee, and it'll feature a coffee robot. So those are some of the improvements and ongoing initiatives at the airport, which leads us into the discussion about future air service, where I will introduce Jack Penning, the managing partner of Volaire Aviation. Jack's worked with our airport for over 10 years and is an alumni of the University of Illinois. So, Jack.
Thank you, Tim, and thank you all for having me. My firm represents over 100 airports in the country in air service development, so in recruiting air service. As Tim mentioned, I did go to school here before this building was even here, we determined, which, wow. That dates me. Before the skyline looked like that, before it looked like that. It's been a little while, but it's always nice to be back because my mother still lives in the community, and this is a very important project for me personally and my firm of 9 people. We work all over the state of Illinois too. We have over 50 years combined experience in this state. I'm proud of the team I put together and the company that I own now. So if we go to the next slide, I want to start out with where we are today and what's going on in the region. The big thing I want to point out is our air service is actually in a very good spot today at CMI. We've got larger jets on every single flight, dual class. We have first class and coach. They're all large, none of those small jets where you have to gate check your bags or anything like that. 2 flights a day to Dallas. We have a 3rd flight to Chicago that's being added. So our service is actually doing well, especially compared to peers. Bloomington Normal, Frontier has ended service there. They lost service to Detroit. They lost service to Minneapolis. Their remaining service, they still have 50-seat jets to Chicago. In Springfield, United completely left the market. Springfield has had American and service to Dallas. So our other peer markets in Illinois have seen service decline while our service is doing very, very well. So our market is thriving, and that's because of the community here. It's because of the Champaign-Urbana metro area, which is the only metro in Illinois that's actually growing, believe it or not. If we go to the next page here, Springfield, because they had seen air service declines, was very aggressive and put together a revenue guarantee fund, a lot like what we're going to talk about today, to secure service on Breeze to Orlando and to Tampa. Those are both twice weekly flights. They put up an undisclosed amount of money in a revenue guarantee. Unfortunately, we don't have the same resources as other communities. The main reason why we don't is this airport doesn't have any tax revenue. There's no property tax here. Every other downstate airport has a property tax to support that airport. We do not. This airport is run like a business. It's a good thing Tim's there because he runs it like a business. And that puts us at a disadvantage. That's why we have to go to the community for support here as opposed to other spots. If you look at the next page here, Bloomington has had for a long time leisure service like what we're talking about. They have had Allegiant. Many of you have probably taken Allegiant from Bloomington. Started in 2007. It still fills 90% of seats, but only 3% of Bloomington passengers that get on those flights to Florida come from Champaign County. 3%. There is a real perception in this community that when people drive to get on a flight and they go to Bloomington, that a huge number are using that airport. That's not true. When people drive, almost 50% go to Chicago airports and about 20% go to Indianapolis. Very, very small percentages use the other airports in Illinois because when people drive, they're going to fly nonstop. That's what the data shows. So we know this type of service can be successful here. This leisure-based service, Florida, Arizona, Las Vegas. We also know that market's not being served at Willard Airport. If we go to the next page, what we're fighting against in the industry is a massive pilot shortage. That's why we have fewer flights on larger planes. Airlines have to use their pilots more efficiently. We're 13,000 plus pilots short of what airlines need to fly what they had in 2019. There were that many retirements in that period during the pandemic, and the pilot shortage is going to get worse. Even though we have great training from Parkland out at Willard Airport, there aren't enough people going into aviation as pilots to overcome the number that must retire at the age of 65 over the next several years. This is what's putting stress on regional air service. There simply aren't enough pilots to fly the things the airlines used to fly and want to fly. So communities are losing service, and more communities will lose service. If we go to the next slide, this is the current U.S. airline network. It's about 360 airports in the United States that have scheduled airline service today. And of course, you can see the dot there on Champaign-Urbana, Champaign County, our area. If we advance one more slide, that's what air service looks like if regional carriers can't find enough pilots over the next 2 years to fly their networks. And you will note, Champaign-Urbana is gone. We rely entirely on regional carriers that are very strapped for pilots. Why are they strapped for pilots? Not only do we not have enough in training, we have low-cost carriers in leisure markets that are expanding very rapidly and offering very attractive pay for regional pilots to go to those carriers. Because of that, we have got to do a better job as a community of working to secure lower cost service so that we ensure that we have an airport that is sustainable over the long term. If we go to the next page, these are all the communities that have lost at least one airline since 2020 with the logo of the airline. 131 airports have lost a network carrier since 2020. 131. 10 airports have lost service completely, like Williamsport, Pennsylvania, which is about to enter into a multi-million-dollar revenue guarantee for a 9-seat, single-engine, unpressurized service without any airline code, just to try and keep the airport open. Number one, please check service here first and use it when it makes sense. And number two, we are going to have to recruit beyond American to ensure this airport is sustainable. If we go to the next page, the type of travel that used to be in this market has changed, and it won't come back to the business travel standard that we saw before the pandemic. 28% of workdays are now remote. Used to be 5%, 28%. Day of week travel, business travel, Tuesday, Wednesday travel is down by hundreds of thousands each week, while weekend travel is way up. And it doesn't mean that only people are traveling for leisure. It means that business travel has changed in patterns. And I'm a good example. I travel every single week all over this country to meet with groups like you. And more often now, because of the freedom of working from home, my wife can come with me. And so we're going to travel on Saturday, and we're going to try to find a lower fare. And we're going to stay for a whole week. That's what we're seeing in business travel today, which is why less than daily service on peak days of the week, not daily, less than daily is working so well in so many markets, because if you have a meeting in Orlando or a conference, you're going to fly Saturday, stay all week, take the family, and fly back the following Saturday. You aren't going to go on Tuesday and come back on Thursday anymore. That's how travel patterns have changed. So it matches with what we need to do in terms of strategy. If we go to the next page, revenue guarantees are absolutely required to secure service. Every route you see here is a new nonstop route that has been started with a revenue guarantee since in the last 6 months. So essentially since Thanksgiving. All of these routes. What's happening is there was a flood of funding to many communities through the ARPA, the rescue plan. And many communities put it into revenue guarantees. In other cases, there are property taxes that fund these. But when an airline has a choice of two markets that both make sense, for example, San Luis Obispo, California, another university town, Cal Poly, or Champaign-Urbana, and both forecast to make the same amount of money, but San Luis Obispo has a cushion of $1.8 million against loss, and Champaign-Urbana has no cushion, where are you going to put your airplane? So we aren't really competing against Springfield or Bloomington or Peoria. We're competing against San Luis Obispo and Plattsburgh, New York, and we're competing against Grand Junction, Colorado. Those are our competitors for service, and it's an uneven playing field, which is why we have to raise funding for this guarantee. If we go to the next page, essentially we're trying to structure our strategy around the existing strategy of the carriers you see here and their bases. We are never going to convince a carrier to do something that's completely outside their established strategy. But what we can do is convince them that we should already be in that strategy. And we do that through revenue guarantee. And we're being broad in this case and talking about Florida and Arizona and Nevada because we want to be flexible. The aircraft time and crew time could pop up that's available in Phoenix. And we want to be able to provide a revenue guarantee on that route. Or it could pop up in Orlando or in Tampa. We need to be flexible in order to be successful And that's what we're trying to set this up for. If we go to the next page, really the leisure markets you see here, that's the airlines that are growing, and that's the markets that airlines are favoring. The low-cost carriers, the Avelos, the Breezes, they're taking on multiple aircraft every single month and growing, and that's who we have to be working with. If we go to the next page, how this works. So we have been, as Carly mentioned, in the community a number of times here in the last few months. I've been here, I think this is my third time this year, meeting with government agencies, meeting with private business, meeting with the university to develop a revenue guarantee fund. This is not a subsidy. This is a fund that sits aside once we negotiate with a carrier on a target amount of revenue per flight. The carrier accounts for all of the revenue on that flight, the tickets, the bag fees, seat fees, whatever you pay on that plane. If they make more than the target, we don't owe a dime. If they're under, we reimburse the difference. The University of Illinois, as Carly mentioned, has committed $500,000 to this project. That money goes first, which means the other contributors, like the city of Champaign, city of Urbana, their money sits in reserve behind the university's money. So the guarantee has to burn through $500,000 before we touch the other contributors' money on a share of contribution basis. We look at that on a quarterly basis with the carrier. We audit. Right now, my company, we've got somewhere in the neighborhood of 24 contracts that we're auditing on a quarterly basis. So we have a very good idea if it's accurate or not. And hopefully we're above target and we use this to move on. This can be a very successful model. San Luis Obispo, I want to go back to that because I mentioned that. About 8 years ago, they gathered $2 million in revenue guarantee money, and we recruited service to Seattle. That service did so well, we didn't use any of the money. We recruited service to Portland. We burned a small amount on that. We recruited service using the same fund to San Diego. We burned a small amount on that. Then Denver, then Dallas. Those didn't use any of the funds. Las Vegas just started in December. We have 1.8 of that 2 million left. And so far, Las Vegas hasn't used any of the funds. Ideally, this is what gets us started to recruit multiple routes to this airport over a period of years. And I think the next page should be just the final page. Well, I did want to mention, we do have a revenue guarantee still in place for service to Washington, D.C. Because of the regional pilot shortage, this project is on hold. We continue to talk with interested carriers on this, but our focus has had to change because of changes in airline strategy to the leisure-focused service. And so that's where we are now. And the next page, this is where we are. We're looking for these services, $500,000 committed from the university, and cities of Urbana and Champaign are committed, and we certainly appreciate their support. So with that, I will wrap up and we'll be happy to take questions.
I have a question. So over the years, I'm in this community for almost 20 years, and I've seen such commitment, revenue commitment coming and going. Like, I remember at one time, one airline came, they mentioned that their first service would be on this day, and also they also announced their last service would be after 3 months. So like, based on the previous experiences with all these, how you think that this time it would be different?
So airline strategy has become much more stable because the asset of pilots is so precious now. If you go back into the mid-2000s, airlines were willing to try all kinds of things because pilots were very cheap, airplanes were very cheap, and fuel was very cheap up until the financial crisis. And so we saw airlines trying. Allegiant was here, for example. We had a revenue guarantee for Delta if you go back far enough. That was because airlines were much more willing with cheap resources to take chances. What we're seeing today is airlines are not willing to stand up all the infrastructure to begin a new market without feeling comfortable that the market is sustainable. And so I can note in my career, 84% of the routes I recruited with a revenue guarantee still exist today, pandemic notwithstanding. If I thought there was any chance that this would not stick, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you. I think we have a much more stable industry. It's not a healthy industry, but it's on the way. The problem is we have an uneven playing field because of a lot of other airports that have advantages that we don't.
As far as advantages, and haven't been down at the airport on a daily basis for probably 10 years, but thinking about things that we have that other airports don't, I know at least at one time American Eagle relied heavily on our FBO Flightstar for, I mean, Jesus, they were replacing engines even on a nightly basis. And that's something that I think is pretty unique to Champaign, where we have essentially a FBO that's capable of doing major aircraft maintenance with a pretty tight turnaround right here on site. Is that something that we can leverage to say, hey, you know, Allegiant or whoever this person is, this would be a great spot to get some leisure travel, but also we can do work on planes if you have aircraft that need servicing?
Absolutely. One of the things I want to underscore is Flightstar made a multi-million-dollar commitment with the help of the university to build a new hangar to handle the larger planes. We have all flights on larger planes, while downstate airports do not on American, because Flightstar does that maintenance. And in every meeting that we have with every new carrier, we always talk about their ability to do that maintenance. I think it's a huge asset.
So I know these guys, and I'll tell you this, I served on this committee for 9 years, and there is no better airport director than Tim Bannon. He does a wonderful job, physical plant-wise. He's hamstrung with the things that Jack and Carly have described to you. But the airport is ready for growth. Carly and Jane as director and associate, what's your title now, Janie?
CEO.
See, okay. They have the most to gain from this avenue of progress that we're trying to achieve here, and that is more tourism, more businesses. If you take a look at Stanford and Palo Alto, they have a working relationship of Stanford tells Palo Alto, we're going to bring in the best and the brightest, but we want the greatest amount of amenities and cultural events and things to keep our professors and administrators here. So it makes sense for this kind of a synergy of a town and gown. At our pre-board meeting, I asked Carl if we shouldn't make a contribution to this, and he was going to check out the legalities of it. And I spoke with Carl afterwards, and he said, it looks like we can do it. And I would like this to be on the agenda to discuss as a part of a partnership with, I'll go a step further. And I know you guys are taking one step at a time. And I know that the importance of the university's $500,000 offer is a wonderful, wonderful start. But it's an ongoing thing. And when the reserves drop, you need to build those reserves back. So a one and done is not going to cut it for ongoing leisure travel. I point out Dubuque. They brought in Avelo. Avelo started with 2 flights down to Florida and 1 to Vegas. Jack, am I right? They burned through the $1 million, and they didn't pull out, but what did they do? The flights to Florida, they've suspended until the season comes back. So they're back to no airline whatsoever. They had American, and in March of 23, American said, we've got an asset that we can move, and we're going to take it to a better place to get more revenue. So I would also ask our board to consider, and Carl for the MTD to consider, that we make the first pledge that this would be an ongoing, if needed, pledge. So if we burn through the $500,000 and then the other partners are part of this, that we would do the same, that we would keep that revenue source handy so that we can adjust that so that they can maybe take another route. Jack, I don't know your business, but we need to make sure that we have that reserve built in. And property taxes are a hard sell in this community because we had a school referendum and they had other things that are going on that might make it hard to sell. But we've got other sources of revenue, and I don't pretend to tell each municipality what they should use, but there's a variety of sources that revenue source to refund this, probably the most important thing for growth in this community, the airport, to refund this thing. And, you know, it could be through restaurant, hotel, motel, things that are related to travel. It could be gaming. It could be car rentals that it's tied to travel. It could be a number of other revenue sources that other municipalities would look at and say, we can commit something here. But I think we ought to go for it. I think we ought to, I hope that our group here, our trustees, would seriously consider it. We're already in the transportation business. We're already working with the University of Illinois on a transportation basis with their students. Why wouldn't we support transportation coming in and out of their airport? So, Carl, could we put that on the agenda?
Yes, sir. That is the plan. So at the next board meeting, we'll have an action item for you to consider making a contribution to the minimum revenue guarantee. As Alan noted, I did check with our corporate counsel because I had I just wanted to make sure that the unique aspects of our funding sources allowed us to make a contribution to something that wasn't directly related to our operations. And so we've gotten an opinion from the legal counsel, and as long as the revenue is locally generated, and of course we can't use any state or federal public transit grant funding for this type of expenditure, we can use our own locally generated revenue for this type of expenditure. So I think we're good to go on that front. And so yes, I will have an agenda item on next month's agenda for discussion.
Sorry to drag this out, but I'm curious, Carl, could you explain why we do not currently have bus service at the airport?
Boy, you really do want to drag it out, don't you? Well, it's we used to operate a route to the airport called the Airbus. That was a route that the University of Illinois directly supported. So we had the state operating grant that paid for our portion, and then the university kicked in for the local share. As you recall, the airport is actually not in the district, and so when we're operating outside the district, we're required to cover the full expenses of the route. And so in this case, the university did. They did that primarily as a means of providing transportation for university students who attended the aviation classes out there. When the university handed over the aviation department to Parkland's student model is just radically different from the university's. So it's not students moving from campus to the airport and the airport back to campus. Parkland students are all over in a 5-county region, and so they're driving into the airport, and Parkland just didn't, they couldn't wrap their brain around supporting that local share of that service. And so the university also didn't see the need to continue to contribute to that because they weren't their students anymore. They were Parkland students. And so it just went away. It's still not in the district. And until until it's either in the district or we find an alternative source of revenue, we're not going to run a route there.
So the Walmart store is in the district, and so is 45 there. So basically, the thing that's separating the University of Illinois airport from Walmart is the orange and blue golf course. Would there be an impediment towards us annexing the airport into the district? There would be some tax revenue there because there are obviously entities like Flightstar that have a net lease that are paying property taxes on their leasehold interest. So there would be some level of a revenue stream, but I think if we're going to try to push sort of this unified transportation, we have Amtrak, we have bus service, and we have an airport. I think it would be really good if people could, catch a bus from the Amtrak terminal downtown and take it to the airport and catch a plane and not have to get an Uber or walk from Walmart down a state road and down a twisty road. And, that's what Google's suggesting that I do when I ask for. Is that a possibility that we could potentially do that?
So 3 things in response to that. One is there is no impediment to us annexing the airport. It is contiguous to an existing part of our district boundary, and so legally we could perform an annexation. So there is no impediment. However, we have an informal understanding with the university, and I'm happy to open up that conversation again with the university, but I've never seen an indication that the university feels any differently today than they did over the last 20 years, but we have an informal agreement that we would not annex the university, primarily because it would radically change the financial picture for the private taxable entities on the airport, Flightstar being the primary one, but the car rental agencies as well, and this new cafe that Tim mentioned. We just said it's informal. There's no written agreement to not annex, but we have had discussions, and they've asked us not to do that. We can revisit that. However, the third thing is it is extremely difficult for us to provide service that makes sense for the air service because, and we can have conversations with American about this all day long, but American changes their flight times all the time. Frequently, and so for us to have bus service that is scheduled in a way that makes sense for passengers to arrive and then check their bags, get through security, and make their flight. I mean, we can set that schedule, and then American is going to change their flight time, and then we've got people who don't want to take the bus because they're going to have to wait too long, or the flight time changed so that they are now missing their flight because of the bus schedule, and we just don't have the ability to be as nimble as American Airlines is because they can basically make their schedule anything they want. We can't. We publish it. We publish our bus schedules, and it's very difficult with our scheduling operators and all of that to just change on the fly when American changes their flight schedule. So all of that to say, I very much agree with you. I would love to have bus service there, and if it were frequent enough so that it didn't matter when American Airlines changed their flight schedule, then I'm all in, and I'd want to do it. Until we get to that point, or until there's enough flights so that our schedule can accommodate their movement. It's just a really difficult service for us to provide that makes any sense for users.
Approximately how many people are working at the airport? People that are maybe cooking, cleaning airplanes, etc., doing ground.
Yeah, employees at the airport, I would guess somewhere in the maybe 300 to 400 range, inclusive of Flystar and others.
Since you're with the Village of Savoy, right, Mr. Walton? How many units do you think there are on Hartwell Court and that sort of adjoining area? That's a lot of either working class people or University of Illinois grad students that we don't currently serve. I mean, would that be something that the village might consider opening up to annexation if we could serve that area?
I think the village is committed to being a partner with MTD and the airport and wants to see expansion of transportation travel throughout the community. I think that those are conversations that are probably best to contextualize with, the university and MTD to make sure that we're not crossing any lines, but we would also want to make sure that we're involving the community so that there wasn't any surprises along the way. But I think the village is open to being a constructive partner, so I'm not going to say no to anything, but I also can't commit to anything.
Threw you on the spot there. It's your first meeting.
It's good.
All right, I'll shut up. But I do think we need to think about these things, not just, I'd feel a lot better about a revenue guarantee if we were actually serving the airport with buses. So that's where I'm at.
A couple of questions I have. One, is there a target amount that you're shooting for to have in this quote-unquote escrow account? Is there a target amount that you're looking for?
Yeah, the total target amount is 1 million or more. And that's the number that we've been verbally told by the airlines that we are in conversations with, where they would turn, okay conversations into constructive conversations.
And you currently have 645,000 of that 1 million?
Yeah, we're short of 700 total at this point, officially.
My other question is, would there be any possibility of an on-demand type of service similar to what we have had at certain points in our history at certain parts of the cities?
That's certainly a possibility, and actually it reminds me that I should have mentioned we do provide our ADA demand response service to the airport, so we do already provide that service. But yes, we could potentially have discussions about some kind of a demand response service. It's difficult because it's got to connect with our fixed route service, and then that's quite a ways away. And so scheduling those trips would be tricky. Again, it's totally worthwhile to look at as a potential and see about accommodating that. But then that opens up that discussion about annexation again. So, that's probably a conversation we need to have on the side with the university.
Any further questions?
I had one more. What responsibilities or roles can regional airports play in adopting environmental sustainability pledges, and how relevant is that in the overall development of revenue guarantee campaigns?
It's a good question. So there have been, there are many efforts underway right now to try and ensure that long-term regional air service is not only environmentally friendly, but less expensive because of the technology. For example, United Airlines has ordered 250 electric 30-seat turboprops. And the idea being we can serve communities more frequently with zero emission, essentially, electric that's either charged with wind or solar. So those efforts are underway. I have not seen a guarantee effort tied to a specific environmental target, if you will. I can tell you the carriers, so aircraft are always more efficient the more people that they carry. And so these type of carriers burn much less fuel per seat than the regional carrier would. Like our new aircraft burn 40% of the fuel of the old aircraft, but carry 26 more people per flight. So we're already seeing much reduced emissions with the new aircraft that we've got. But again, I haven't seen any airport really tie that to an airline goal other than maybe a quiet goal or something like that.
In addition, the leisure routes be served by larger long haul jets. The electric aircraft that Jack is talking about, those are more, the conceptualization of those is really short hops, like here to Chicago or something. And there's still a lot of things to figure out in that technology. specifically charging of aircraft. You know, you can fuel a plane in 10 minutes. Like, can you charge an airplane in 10 minutes? The more the plane's on the ground, the less it's flying, the less money it's making, right? So there's a lot of issues in the conceptualization phase of that part of the industry, but the long haul routes that require 2, 3, 4 hours of flying, I don't think that technology is quite there yet for those types of routes.
Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming and making a presentation. And as you understand, we'll be looking at this further at our next meeting. So thank you very much.
Dick, if I could just make a comment. What Tim just said about the battery electric airplanes is the exact same scenario that we have encountered with battery electric buses. And so we went with fuel cell electric buses. So, you know, think big, Tim. Chair, I think this would be a good time for us to now suspend the regular board meeting and go back to the committee meeting, because I believe all the students are here now. So I think we're good to go on that front.
Thanks, Jeffrey.
No, that makes perfect sense. We'll take a very short pause.
If we need a motion, so moved that we switch over to the Decennial Committee and suspend the board meeting.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. So we'll return now to the meeting, the Decennial Committee meeting. And we've already called the roll. I'm trying to see where we left off. I don't think we asked for audience participation yet.
I think we did. I think we did everything. We were at the point of the presentation. So
yeah, you're right.
I think we can go ahead and hand it over to Risha. Are you starting it off? If you can just come up, as you do your presentation, it's the right button, and make sure you introduce yourself each time a new speaker comes up, and take it away. Thanks.
Thank you. Hi, welcome to our midpoint presentation. So we are part of Illinois Business Consulting, IBC, and essentially we've just been working with MTD, and this midpoint presentation will just be a compilation of everything that we've done up until this point and some next steps, which I'll get into further. But before we start with that, I'll pass it off to Will to introduce IBC.
Perfect. Thank you, Risha. So just to get started, a little background on who we are. We are Illinois Business Consulting. We are the largest student-run fee-based consulting org in the nation, actually. And we do semester-long engagements with various clients, about 25 projects a semester. And this semester, MTD has been one of our wonderful clients, and we've been doing an engagement with them. We're super excited to share our progress so far throughout the semester with you today, and we encourage any feedback you may have, as it will help guide the rest of our project. Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Can we go to the next slide? So we'll really briefly do a team introduction. So my name is Richa. I'm the project manager for this project, and I'm a finance and data science major.
Hello again. I'm William Shoesmith. I'm the senior manager for this project, and I am a finance and information systems major.
Hi, I'm Kushi. I'm an economics major, and I'm a senior consultant on this project.
My name is Ben Mariloff. I'm also studying economics, and I am also a senior consultant on this project.
Hi everyone, I'm Mike Rivera. I'm a junior studying finance.
Hello everyone, my name is Amr Behera. I'm a junior studying finance and information systems.
Hello everyone, I'm Shea Wong and I'm a chemical engineer.
Hi everyone, my name is Pragat and I'm a freshman studying computer science and economics.
We're missing 2 members on our team, but we also have Rakshita and Sia, who are both a part of our team. Next slide, please. So really quickly, I'll go over the agenda. So we just went over IBC and our team overview. And then we'll talk a little bit about what we've been doing as a part of IBC for MTD and some of the methodology behind that. We'll move on to just looking at an industry analysis and MTD background of the public transit industry, and then to operational efficiency assessments. as well as some interviews and internal interviews we've conducted, and then we'll move on to what we've been doing and some next steps. So with that, next slide, please. We'll start off with the project overview and methodology. So essentially, this was just to understand the problem statement and IBC's approach to find a solution. So the problem statement is that MTD is a public transit company and a governmental unit that is now required to perform an operational efficiency assessment as a part of the new Decennial Committee on Local Government's Efficiency Act. MTD has asked IBC to perform this mandated operational assessment and recommend solutions to improve MTD's operational efficiency. So there's a lot on this slide. I'll really quickly just go over the key steps that we took. So the 2 steps that we've taken so far are doing industry, company background, and operational efficiency research, as well as internal primary research and KPI identification. We're currently on doing external primary research with other public transit companies, as well as conducting the actual assessment. And then our final step to this project is some final insights and recommendations. So I won't go over the methodology completely, but I'll go over some of the deliverables. So our first few deliverables were just giving a quick summary about the background research and current state of MTD's operations for us to just get a better insight into what the operations are currently looking like. We also had an internal interview insights where we interviewed several MTD employees, and we were able to compile a list of relevant key performance indicators based on those interviews. And then currently we're in the process of coming up with benchmarks and performing the assessments, as well as creating visualizations to understand MTD's current operations and inefficiencies. And then finally, we're going to compile a list of insights and recommendations to provide for MTD and implementation strategies for those. So with that, I'll pass it off to Ben.
Hello. So to address the problem statement that Richa introduced in the previous slide, we broke it down into 6 phases in order to attack it in the most efficient way possible. So if you see on the slide, the top 3 boxes are what we have already done in the gray. So starting with the first one, we did preliminary research on what MTD is and the industry as a whole. Next, we did secondary research on the legalities and the possible assessments that we could be doing. And then we did some internal interviews with MTD and did some KPI assessments. Currently, in the orange box, we are doing pure company research and external interviews. So we are getting data from other people in this industry in the same region doing the same kind of work as MTD. And so we're in the process of communicating with those in order to conduct these interviews. Next steps are in the blue right here. We're going to see which potential gaps that we have in our data from the interviews that we conduct with the peer companies. And then we're going to compile all of our research and our findings into our final deliverables, which is that presentation and the report. I'll be passing it off to Richa.
Really quickly, before we advance, are there any questions regarding the problem statement or methodology that we've used to project with this project so far? Great. Can you go to the next slide, please? So now that we've kind of understood what the approach to solving this problem is, the approach that IBC is taking, we'll start off with a little bit of the research that we conducted. So like I mentioned, our first step was just conducting an industry analysis and understanding more about MTD's background to just gain a deeper understanding of the industry as a whole and certain company goals. So with that, I'll pass it off to Pragat.
Okay, so first off, I'll start off with the background. So MTD is committed to public transportation, and they offer a variety of different packages for seniors, veterans, and students. And while they're doing that, they're also very committed to environmental sustainability. Now moving on to MTD's goals, so they hope to have buses come around every 10 minutes in shorter intervals. They also want to switch to more environmentally friendly hydrogen buses. And finally, one of the bigger focuses was increasing employee retention rates. Now, in terms of our research, we just looked at the transit industry with a focus on the Decennial Committee Act. We also looked at other usage cases within other communities. And finally, we did interviews with various department heads at MTD. Now, looking at the major departments, we chose to focus on 2 departments, which was the operations department and the training department. So the operations department, it focuses on customer satisfaction and making sure everything is delivered consistently. Then the training department tries to make sure that everybody's ready for performing well at MTD. Now I'd like to pass it back to Risha.
Are there any questions on this slide before we progress? Next slide, please. So now that we were able to understand a little bit of MTD's background and the industry's background as well, we moved on to actually looking at different operational efficiency assessments to identify their application to MTD. So with that, I'll pass it off to Amrit.
Thank you, Richa. Can we get the next slide? So looking within operational efficiency, we wanted to assess how the utilization of resources are being best served for MTD and the community. Our methodology, as we talked about before, consisted of both secondary research and primary research. Looking first at our secondary research, this is where we came up with the definition of what operational efficiency looks like, just for our own understanding and to make sure that we're guided correctly as we go through our research, as well as pulling some industry standards that we could later use to compare once we have run through our own research and kind of calculations. Moving into the primary research stage, this is where we've kind of determined what operational efficiency would look like for MTD and kind of fill in the gaps of what it is that MTD is looking for versus what it is that we were able to find through our secondary research. And then we were also able to get some data that we'll use, as we'll talk about in future slides, to come up with these kind of metrics. Moving on to the right side of the slide, these were the 5 different operational efficiency assessments that we were able to find through our secondary research. We chose to focus on quality and optimization and finance. Quality and optimization being kind of talking to the department in management systems and operations, where we're kind of able to find quantitative measures and then look at how the scope can be narrowed to most effectively measure efficiency. In terms of finance, this is where we were kind of turning more of a look to economic impact rather than full financials. And the most important thing that we wanted to keep in mind here was keeping public service at top priority. But before we move on, is there any questions on this slide? If not, I can pass it back to Risha.
Thank you, Amrit. Can we go to the next slide, please? So after looking at different operational efficiency assessments, we decided to conduct some internal interviews, like I mentioned before, with different MTD employees. And so we conducted these interviews to just gain a better understanding of operations within MTD. So with that, I'll pass it off to Kushi.
Yep. Thank you, Richa. I will now give you an overview of our internal interview methodology. We created 5 profiles for the interview guides, of which operations management, financial impact, and staffing inefficiencies gave us the most useful insights, so they have been highlighted in blue. We asked a variety of questions to understand MTD's operations, community impact, KPIs, and regulations. Moving on to the executive summary on the right, we interviewed 10 people from MTD via Zoom and Microsoft Teams and recorded our notes on a Word document. Finally, the purpose of the questions was to get insights unavailable through secondary research, gain employees' perspectives on MTD, and get more KPI data and other metrics. Overall, our meticulous approach helped us cover a broad range of questions for primary research. Are there any questions on this slide? If not, I'll pass it back to Richa.
Thank you, Kushi. So I'll talk a little bit about the different insights we gained from the internal interviews and how they were relevant to our project scope. So we interviewed 5 different profiles, as Kushi mentioned. I'll briefly talk a little bit about the insights. So different insights we gained for probably some, like we mentioned, the 2 more important sectors was operational efficiency and financial impact. So in terms of operational efficiency, the goal for MTD is to achieve the pre-pandemic service, and there's just a current challenge with maintaining service. And then in terms of financial impact, they are dependent on federal and grant funding, and they have somewhat outdated systems. So something that we've noticed, which would be relevant to our project, is just emphasize backup drivers to reduce absenteeism rate, as well as improving technology for better financial analysis and implementing KPIs to obtain partnerships. So the 3 main points that we got from all of this was just staffing inefficiencies, can be analyzed with KPIs like absenteeism and employee retention. A lack of software for financial can pivot our assessment to economic impact through looking at ridership. And then we will pinpoint areas that struggle to align with MTD's goals for adaptability and resilience. So just to kind of sum up this slide, these were the 3 main takeaways from all of the interview insights. And so with that, we are progressing forward with staffing and efficiencies, optimization, and economic impact through ridership. Are there any questions?
I'll just throw one at you. What would be a practical way to implement a KPI to, how was it you phrased that if you put that back up there? So implement KPIs to obtain partnerships. What does that mean like in everyday language? How does that apply to what we're doing here?
So this was just, this is just kind of like a brief overview of the insights we gained, looking at different KPIs, how we can kind of utilize those KPIs to implement or to obtain like certain partnerships in terms of like financial partnerships. But like I mentioned, we're kind of pivoting away from that because we realized that with the scope and timeline of our project, it wasn't necessarily attainable to accomplish that. So we're focusing more on economic impact and looking at ridership as opposed to looking at different KPIs for partnerships.
One of our mandates from the state is to examine intergovernmental agreements between MTD and other units of government in the state. Have you looked into that, or did I miss it?
Yeah, we will get into that in future slides as well, but we have looked into that, and specifically the UIUC agreement, which we talk about in a few slides, like down from the slide. But that is also part of like the ridership and economic impact and how MTD is serving the community through these like intergovernmental agreements. Are there any other questions? Okay, next slide, please. So now, like I mentioned, we focused on 2 specific operational assessments, which was the service optimization assessment and the financial economic impact operational assessment. So we'll start off by just taking a little bit of a deeper dive into the financial economic impact operational assessment and how we determine methodology and applicable KPIs for this assessment. So with that, I'll pass it back off to Amrit.
Thank you, Richa. So as you mentioned, one of the first things that we decided to look at was economic impact, which is translation from our the financial assessments. And for this one, following our background, we wanted to focus on budgets and expenses. Budgets looking at kind of grants and just general revenue, as well as general revenue gained through operations, as well as expenses that usually went with those operations. In regards to efficiency, following our secondary research into financial KPIs and financial assessments, we pulled from the research 5 different KPIs that could be considered, those being profitability, efficiency, liquidity, leverage, and valuation. Out of those, the most prominent was efficiency, just because we could use annual ridership as a metric, as one of the KPIs to compare once we were able to get the data from MTD and then compare to those industry standards. Moving on to the right side of the screen, the 3 components of financial economic impact assessments were output, labor, and income. Output just being the accumulation of services that were provided during operations. Labor being a look at employees and how productive the workforce is, and how we can look at how productivity is measured within the workplace. And then income, those being funds that are generated both through operations and through those grants. Finally, moving on to the full right, the 3-step process that we came up with for methodology was gather, clean, and record. With gather, it was just a matter of gathering the information. This could be through softwares. We kind of left that to whatever MTD has currently been doing. With cleaning, using softwares to format the data so that it could be comparable to those industry standards that we have found. And then finally, with record, we wanted to create visuals or just some way that we could analyze the different trends that came in through our research. So for the final takeaway for this slide, through the identification of these assessments and measurement methods, IBC can effectively just discern how to most effectively measure economic impact through these financial KPIs. Does anybody have any questions about this slide? If not, I can pass it to Pragath.
So I'm looking at the potential financial KPIs. We chose 3 main KPIs. We chose operating cost per mile, revenue per mile, and annual ridership growth rate. So I'm looking at the first one. The first one was used to analyze service delivery efficiency, and it's especially helpful because we can look for areas to reduce costs and optimize them. Now, looking at revenue per mile, it's mainly important for looking at the financial performance at MTD, and this way we can evaluate contributions to revenue. And finally, looking at the annual ridership growth rate, this is just the trends and how ridership is going to change over the years, and this could be useful for setting benchmarks and predicting and forecasting what's going to happen to ridership. Now, moving on to our key takeaways, these 3 were the big KPIs among like all transit industries that seem pretty important, and we believe these KPIs could be used to enhance efficiency and also reduce costs to optimize revenue. Now I'd like to pass it back to Risha.
Thank you, Pragath. One thing I just wanted to know about the presentation so far is it's just a combination of all of the research we've done until now, and how we've kind of diverted away from certain topics or focused in on certain topics. So I know that it's like a lot of different KPIs, but I think the point that I'm trying to make is that they're not necessarily what we've been focusing on. It's just kind of what we've been doing till now to show the progress that we've made. So with that, I'll move on to service optimization, operational efficiency assessments. So we're looking deeper into this specific category of operational efficiency assessments and determining the methodology and applicable KPIs. So with that, I'll pass it off to Michael.
Hi, everyone. So with this operational service assessment, in essence, what it is a evaluation process for internal and external KPIs. The internal is the KPIs that we've identified with the benchmarking, and the external is those peer analysis that we'll be conducting in these upcoming weeks. So if you look at the methodology, this is the way that we kind of broke it down. We have identified the KPIs and the benchmarks, and we are planning on looking into those peer companies, as mentioned earlier, to analyze any of the data that they may have and compare it to MTD to see if any components that they are doing well can transfer over to MTD to improve those operational efficiencies. So looking into the internal, these are just, as I mentioned earlier, those KPIs that we've analyzed to see how close MTD is to those benchmarkings for internal or these industry standards, and the external with those peer analysis companies to analyze and understand that data. If there are any questions with this slide, I'd be happy to answer. If not, I'll pass it on to Amru.
Could I get the... Yeah. So as we mentioned, service efficiency was one of the other metrics that we want to look at. And from those relevant KPIs listed on the screen right now, we chose to focus on bus utilization, spare ratio, and employee retention. We thought that these were measures that we could get a lot of useful data from and then create more subjective quantitative measures on from these KPIs. Moving into the methodology, we focused on collecting, calculating, and comparing, collecting the actual data from our secondary research, and then using the information that we were able to get to essentially calculate the rates and ratios, whether this is from pre-existing ratios or ratios that we could calculate ourselves, given the information. And then finally, the last step would be to compare. This is where we would draw our insights, both from historical information that MTD provides us, as well as just industry standards, both within our industry right now here, and then peer industries that we pull from our secondary research and prime interviews. So moving on to the bottom of the screen, we focused on 2 aspects: bus utilization and spare ratio, which we kind of grouped. And this is just looking at staffing trends and how they are compared to available buses. This would allow us to show how many of those buses are being effectively used and how many buses are being left for spares, and pull metrics on efficiency from there. And then moving into employee retention and training, one of the biggest things that we noticed through our research was staffing being a very strong driving factor of efficiency. So we want to focus on how MTD can meet ridership demands, and then how trainings and internal procedures, whether it's training time, whether it's placement, whether it's having enough buses to kind of meet the training needs, can decrease turnover and just overall increase efficiency. Are there any questions on this slide? If not, I can pass it to Risha.
Thank you. So now after kind of doing all the secondary research and supplementing it with the internal interviews on different operational efficiency assessments, we were able to start conducting the actual operational efficiency assessments. And this started by narrowing it down to 3 specific KPIs and finding calculation methods and benchmarks for each of those KPIs. So with that, I'll pass it off to Shane.
Thank you. So now I'll be going and diving more into the 3 KPIs that we did. To start with utilization rate, this KPI is the number of buses and service to the total fleet, and we decided to choose this to see how buses are effectively meeting customer service levels and demands. It's also calculated, and we looked into spare ratio, which is the number of spare buses to total fleet, and we decided to look into that just to because it's helpful in thinking about operational efficiency and minimizing the downtime due to maintenance and other things that might come up. Next, moving on to ridership. This total yearly number of people riding MTD buses, and we decided to look into that just because it's a good economic indicator for economic impact because it directly affects the community and how MTD is serving the community, which is a big fundamental goal of MTD to positively impact the community. And then that would also help us with the spare ratio and utilization rate to use those 2 KPIs together. Finally, moving on to employee retention. Like mentioned, this is a big area of improvement, and there's inefficiencies with that. 2 main ones that we've seen through peer interviews or through internal interviews was the increase in call-offs and also the increase in the bus operators leaving within the first couple of years of work, which is super inefficient because it's a big waste on MTD resources and time to train a bus driver just for them to leave. So with that, we looked into the turnover rate to kind of really look into improving the employee retention in the first 2 years, and also the absenteeism rate to kind of observe trends between how many calls are happening per day throughout the course of the years. And with these, we have some of the benchmarks that we found through secondary research with utilization rate to aim for 95 to 100% and 20% spare ratio, which is determined by the FTA. Then moving on to ridership, with this, it's really important to hit the post-COVID number of around 12 million and trying to maintain at least the current ridership number. And then finally, with employee retention, the average turnover rate is 54% for transportation industries and 2.6% is the average absenteeism rate. And with all these benchmarks, we hope to look into peer company as well in the following weeks to try to compare MTD's numbers with them and see how the transportation industry and MTD is doing with industry standards. Is there any questions in regards to this slide? I can pass it back to Risha.
Thank you. So now we'll move on to the peer interview preparation that we've been doing. Like I mentioned before, to supplement all of this and also to find more industry benchmarks and just generally industry standards, we're looking into different peer companies to understand the trends in the industry and understand further benchmarks for MTD. So with that, I'll pass it off to Kushi.
Thank you, Risha. I will give you an overview of our plan for peer company interviews. So in total, we've decided to interview 10 peer companies. The right side of the slide explains how we selected them, basically the methodology. So we chose these 10 companies because they're similar to MTD in terms of university affiliation, goals, funding, and size. Apart from that, most of these companies are located in the Midwest, and we also have the contact information of the potential interviewees, which makes it easier for us to conduct interviews. Moving back onto the left side of the slide, we have examples of specific questions that we'll be asking these interviewees. We have questions on operational efficiencies and inefficiencies, ridership, and other data tracking metrics and other KPIs. Finally, the main insight that we hope to gain from peer interviews is to understand whether peers are facing the same challenges that MTD is facing, to what extent, and what they are doing to overcome them. Overall, peer interviews will help us conduct horizontal analysis and formulate improvement strategies for MTD. Are there any questions on the slide? If not, I'll pass it back to Richa.
Thank you, Kushi. So just to kind of go over some next steps, can you go to the next slide, please? So we've outlined the remaining steps of the project to lead us to provide insightful recommendations. So like I mentioned, currently we're on the peer company and benchmark data where we're just conducting these interviews, gathering insights, formulating benchmarks based on these industry standards, and then compiling MTD data to perform operational assessments. And then in the following weeks, we're going to further do the assessments and comparisons to the peer data that we've collected. And then in our final few weeks of this project, our plan is to compile it to create final insights and recommendations and recommend solutions to improve inefficient operations for MTD. So with that concludes our midpoint presentation. Are there any questions regarding the presentation or any specific parts? Thank you for having us.
Thank you to all of you. We appreciate your efforts very much and look forward to hearing back at the end.
Like this bit.
Go on.
Great work.
I'm not so old that I can't remember what it was like when I was your age. You young men and women have shown a poise that I could not have matched when I was your age. And I compliment you on not only your work, but your presentation. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Just thought I turned that on. Sorry about that. Okay, the next Decennial Committee meeting will be on April 24th, 2024 at 3 p.m. immediately preceding the regular board meeting. Okay, I guess we're ready to get back to our regular, so-called regular business. Carl?
Right, so we need a motion to adjourn the committee, and then we'll come back into regular.
Yeah. Motion to adjourn the committee.
Do I hear a second?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, so we're now ready to get back to the managing director's report. Carl?
Thank you, IBC. That was great. Really appreciate the presentation. All right. So back to regular business. A couple of things to note. You got a little, all our fans who watch us on YouTube got a little taste early of Christopher Walton, the Savoy Village Administrator, who has joined our advisory trustee group. He's been appointed by the Village of Savoy to sit as an advisory trustee. And so we appreciate our relationship with Christopher and Savoy and look forward to his participation in this. So welcome. And then, no offense, Christopher, but of more note than that, I just want to mention that today's meeting is an end of an era. This will be the last board meeting that Beth Brunk attends as the executive assistant for the Mass Transit District. So Brittany has been with us for a couple of months now, and Beth has set her final retirement date during the month of April. And so it saddens all of staff that it saddens that we lose Beth, but we're also glad for Beth that she gets to move on into retirement while she still is full of vim and vigor. And I just wanted to say that we really appreciate her service to the district. All right, so you can't live up to that, Christopher.
That's a tough act to follow. I'd rather not. Congratulations.
All right, moving on to my report to you. This will be reporting on February statistics, and it starts on page 4 of your board packet. There were 1.1 million rides in February. That is up 18.8% from February of 2023, which had a ridership of 959,000. So we continue to climb back there. Our year-to-date ridership is up 13.4% at 6.5 million compared to 5.8 million last year. So As the students mentioned, and I've mentioned over and over again, we're not at 100% level of service, but we'll be back to 100% of our summer service beginning in mid-May, and then in mid-August, we are anticipating that we'll be back into full service, and that will feel really good and be significant. The next one is many years now of comparison to pre-pandemic and then throughout the pandemic and then where we are today. And this one is for February. And so last month, I think we were only down 2% from the January ridership of last year. The February ridership is down 17% from not of last year, sorry, of the pre-pandemic level, and so now we're at 17%. So that fluctuates a bit year to year, and can depend on how many university days, weekdays there are in a month, and that kind of thing. But you can see the stair step continues, and we have healthy recovery year after year. This is the relative to the level of service that we have on the street. This is revenue hours. This is how we measure how much service we have on the street. And in February, we had 90% of our pre-pandemic service level. And so, as I repeatedly say, we're getting back. All right, moving on to some budget numbers, or financial numbers. The February 2024 operating revenue was 16.6% above February 2023, and the year-to-date operating revenue was 20.6% above FY 2023. The February operating expenses were 15.8% above February 2023, and the year-to-date operating expenses were 12.5% above FY 2023. The year-to-date revenue and expenses, the year-to-date operating revenues were almost $2.2 million above budget, and the operating expenses were $2.9 million below budget. And with that, I just want to note there was a note in your board packet that MTD was awarded or was recognized at the silver level of a bike-friendly business. And so I just want to congratulate our staff and employee group and their efforts to continue to make us a bike-friendly business. I think that's good for employees, and it's good for the community. And then I just want to note that our hydrogen fuel cell electric buses, we have 7 buses on site, and 4 of them are in service and operating well. The other 3 are still in the commissioning phase. We've just received them from the manufacturer, and so the maintenance department is commissioning them, getting them ready for service. And so hopefully, fingers crossed, by the time of our April board meeting, those 3 will also be in service. And then we just have 3 more remaining that are still at the plant and getting the finishing touches from the manufacturer, New Flyer. And our maintenance team will be going back down to Anniston, Alabama to buy those buses and sign off on them, and then they'll be delivered on site as well. With that, I will take any questions that you have through page 35.
Carl, are you going to get the lapel pin stamped with the bicycle award?
A lapel pin? Well, I don't know. Do you think I should? I'm not a big lapel pin wearer, but I don't know. Maybe we can get one for you.
I'm still wearing one from our best little transit system.
Yeah, that's going back to 1989.
Something like that.
Yeah. You mentioned the low, no, and bus facility grant. Getting a liquid hydrogen storage tank, and currently we're not using any liquid hydrogen. Our system just produces compressed hydrogen, I believe.
That's correct, and the buses will always use gaseous hydrogen, but when and if we expand to accept liquid hydrogen delivery, part of that station expansion will be not only the storage vessel for the liquid, but a vaporizer, which will so we'll have a vaporizer, compressor, and then pumps that will vaporize the liquid, compress it, and then pump it into the buses.
All that infrastructure being something that would, I think, on some level, commit us to delivery of hydrogen for a long time. So, I mean, how is the hydrogen generating in the solar array thing working for us? And is that something we're going to look at pivoting from? And then, of course, the cost of liquid hydrogen is pretty steep right now, but maybe it'll drop over the years. And what is sort of the thought process there?
Well, I wouldn't say that we're pivoting away from the on-site production. We'll continue doing the on-site production, but that's, with the current electrolyzer, we can only produce so much. And so that will fuel, it's about just over 400 kilograms a day that we can produce, and that will fuel about 12 buses that we have. And so the liquid, the delivery of the liquid will allow us to jump from having 12 to 90, not that we jump, but expand from 12 to 90. And so that gives us a lot of room and growth. So one of the main reasons that we want to do both, have on-site production and have delivery, is that gives us resiliency. If something happens to the electrolyzer, it goes down, or the solar array, I don't know, any number of problems that can occur and we can't produce it, then we would have an alternative with the liquid that we have delivered. And so that gives us redundancy and resiliency and allows us to get service out on the street. In particular, when we have more and more and more of those buses, it's good to have that resiliency. The other thing is we can expand we could expand the on-site production. We could install another 1 megawatt electrolyzer or a 2 megawatt electrolyzer, and that would get us from 12 buses to 24 or 36 buses, which is still far short of 90, but stair-stepping. The downside to that is that those electrolyzers take up a lot of geography. And so the space that we have set aside for the hydrogen station that we have now, we have some extra space, extra unused space that will accommodate the liquid delivery, but it's not enough space to accommodate additional electrolyzers. So we would have to take our station footprint to 2 or 3 times the size that it currently is. I wish I had an overhead that I could show you what that means. We actually do have the land to do that, but it would take up almost all of the green space that we have on our campus. So that's a downside. The other downside is the cost of building out additional electrolyzers for far fewer buses is 2 or 3 times greater than what the cost would be to expand with the liquid hydrogen and gain those additional 90 buses. And so in the grand scheme of things, it is looking to us, and we still have some analysis to do, but it's looking like the liquid delivery is a better route to take. So having said all that, your point about where are we going to get the liquid and how much is it going to cost? Those are very pertinent questions. There is liquid production in the Midwest, and so there is availability. It is very expensive right now. And so there may be a period of time where we are paying a really high per I guess it's, I was going to say per kilogram, but it's per gallon as it's delivered cost for the liquid hydrogen. But as these Department of Energy funded hydrogen hubs come online, the price should come down dramatically. And in addition to that, there is, as a part of the sorry, I know I'm really going on here. As a part of the Inflation Reduction Act, there is a hydrogen production tax credit that's built into that, and IRS is just finishing up the rules on how that tax credit will be applied. In fact, I was in Washington, D.C. on Monday testifying to the IRS in reference to those rules so that they're applicable to us and our use of hydrogen. So there are all of that to say there are reasonable expectations that the cost will come down dramatically for the cost of the liquid hydrogen.
Are we under any sort of commitment requiring us, like, we saying, well, we'll buy blue hydrogen or green hydrogen, but we're not going to buy gray hydrogen? Or do we have a policy on that, or an idea of where we draw the line as far as the source of the hydrogen?
There's not a policy. There's no law that requires, or regulation that would require one type of hydrogen produced in a certain way. The MTD board has not passed a policy to say that we will only purchase hydrogen under these forms of production. That certainly is a policy that this board could take up and consider. If that's something that you have an interest in, I would, I'm all in on that. I'd love to only have green hydrogen, but the most important thing is that we get service out on the street. And so, if a point in time arises where we can't access green hydrogen and we have to go to blue or even gray hydrogen, and to the public, I'm sorry for all the different colors of hydrogen. We got to get the service out on the street. And so we're going to make an effort to get as green produced hydrogen as we can, but at the end of the day, we need to provide service.
Any other questions or comments?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Serious question, Carl, and maybe it was covered years ago before I came back on the board, but hydrogen, both liquid and gaseous, is a dangerous substance to manipulate. What are our safety protocols?
Yes, we have talked about this extensively, but it was prior to you coming back on the board. So there are hazards with hydrogen, just like there are potential hazards with any energy source. So whether that be gasoline, diesel, compressed natural gas, or even electricity and batteries, those are all hazardous and sometimes toxic materials. Fortunately, we live in a society where we have a lot of safety protocols for handling hazardous materials or using energy sources. And there are safety protocols designed for hydrogen, just like there are safety protocols for compressed natural gas. And in fact, those are very similar safety protocols between compressed natural gas and compressed hydrogen. So we do follow all the safety protocols. Our facilities team is responsible for that, but primarily we have an O&M operations and maintenance agreement with Trillium, the aggregator that installed all of our equipment, and so they're also following all those safety protocols. I do want to say. Hydrogen is not toxic, at least. It wouldn't be good for you to breathe it, and if you only breathed hydrogen, you would die because you need oxygen. But it's not inherently toxic. It is flammable, just like gasoline, diesel, and compressed natural gas are flammable. But hydrogen is 17% lighter than air. And so if there's a leak, it shoots straight up at about 45 miles per hour. And so it actually moves very, very quickly away from where humans are, as opposed to if you have a diesel or gasoline leak that pools around you. And then if there's an ignition event, you're in trouble. Hydrogen can be ignited and it moves away from you and it burns out very, very quickly. I'm sure you're familiar with the Bunsen burner, and if you had a Bunsen burner that was releasing hydrogen and you lit that on fire, if you put your hand in the flame of that hydrogen flame, it would almost instantaneously flay the flesh off of your hand. But you can take your hand and hold it right up next to the flame and not feel any heat. It moves up so rapidly because it's so light. So that's an inherent safety side of that molecule element that isn't real. That gasoline and diesel don't have that benefit.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Carl. Let's move now to action items. We'll be reviewing the MTD 2071.
Sorry, we do have one other item under reports.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
The item B. I can just move on to that if you want. This is, we titled it the Report on Comparative Financial Statements Discussion. A couple of board meetings ago, there was a discussion about whether inflation should be applied to our monthly financial statements. And so we said that we, sorry, the cameras were going crazy there. We said that we would do some research on that item and bring it back to the board and present that research to you. So Michelle Wright has moved up, our finance director, so that she can participate in the discussion. But I just want to note from the outset that we contacted 17 transit agencies, 5 municipalities, the University of Illinois, 2 national associations, and our auditor, and 100% of them indicated that you cannot and should not apply inflation to your monthly financial reports, because that would overstate, it would fraudulently overstate our financial position. And so it is staff's recommendation that we continue to present the financial statements to you that we always have presented to you without an inflationary adjustment applied to them. So that's staff's recommendation, and Michelle is here, and I am available to answer any questions or respond to any discussion that you want to have.
Yeah, I remember the discussion. I think adding the inflation, as you said, I have some experience dealing with some of the transit projects, but I have never seen such kind of adjustments. Yeah.
Yeah, if you recall, Bruce Hannon brought up that concern, and we wanted to do the research and follow up on what his concerns were. But thank you for the work on that. Anything else?
I will just say I know Bruce's heart in that recommendation. He was very protective of the Mass Transit District and was trying to present information when we were saying our expenses are 10% higher than they were last year. His notion was, well, but 7% of that was inflation, and so actually there was only a 3%. And I was very fond of Bruce, and I know he was coming from a good place with that recommendation. But I think at the end of the day, it just paints an inaccurate picture, an inflated picture of what our finances are like.
Okay, I think we're now ready for action items.
Okay.
Thanks. We're going to review the MTD 2071 quality and environmental policy. And it looks like we're going to hear from Drew.
Good afternoon. So for members that are a little bit newer, the quality and environmental policy is kind of the guiding document of the district's management system, which is titled MTD 2071. So this helps us kind of set some commitments, both in the areas of quality and our environmental performance, and kind of helps provide a framework that staff then works to implement these goals and these targets, I suppose. And so to give you a little bit of history on this process, the first time that we brought this document to the board was in, looks like 2011. So between 2011 and 2020, every 2 years, we brought this document back to the board for reapproval, just to kind of reapprove that commitment to the system and to the tenants that are provided within that. So the last update was 2020. And around that time, we changed our approval process for this policy and decided that we would bring it to you, the board, every 4 years or every time that we have a change in the leadership of the board. So that when we have a new board chair, because this is signed by that position. And so we're hitting both of those at this date here. So, Dick, as you stepped into the role, you are our new board chair. So we're looking for approval on that. But it's also been 4 years since we've brought this to the board. I will tell you, though, that we have not made any changes to the policy at this point. We still feel that it meets the needs of MTD and of the management system.
And I'll just tag on to that. This policy statement is relative to the ISO standards certifications that we hold, and we're very proud of those certifications. We think that they, the environmental sustainability management system and the quality management system that are blended into what we call MTD 2071 is productive for the district. It has documented a lot of our practices and SOPs and purpose, so that when we have turnover, we have a management system in place that sort of acts as institutional memory, because when people retire or they leave, they take their experience with them, and sometimes the new people coming in don't have access to somebody who remembers, oh, we do this, or why do we do that? But this system kind of provides that structure for the district, and it's been beneficial. So as Drew mentioned, we think that this is still valuable. It takes a lot of effort, and Drew puts in a lot of time on it, but it's valuable, and our intention is to continue doing it.
So this covers such things as environmental policy, employees, customer service. I mean, it's pretty broad-based.
It is pretty broad-based. I mean, in effect, it touches every single department that we have within the district. It certainly touches more it touches some departments more than others, but no department is left untouched with it. So yeah, it impacts everything.
So we're being asked today to reapprove the same policy that was adopted in 2020?
That is correct.
Triggered because we have a change in the board chair.
It's all my fault.
That's right. At least we know who to point at.
Do I hear a motion to approve the updated MTD 2071 quality and environmental policy?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, well, the next regular Board of Trustees meeting will immediately follow the Decennial. Do we have another one? Decennial Okay, we have. I wasn't sure if we had another one. It'll immediately follow the Decennial Committee meeting on Wednesday, April 24th, 2024 at 3 p.m. right here at Illinois Terminal. Do I hear a motion that we adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you all for your attention and attendance.